Hi there. I just want to take a couple of minutes of your time this morning to talk about assessments. Thank you for all the good work that you've been doing, and I'm really interested in the answers to your questions. You'll notice I don't comment on your discussions much because it would interfere with what you think, because you think I might have the right answer. And I like to read all of yours because I learn from each of them. But I do want to talk a little bit about assessments. It's one of those things that we don't spend a lot of time on, but you may spend a lot of time on it, taking a class in it or whatever at some other point in your life. When we talk about assessments, there's two kinds. There's formal assessments and there's informal assessments. An informal assessment is, I would talk to you, how are you feeling today? That's an assessment. I'm trying to find out. How's your life going? That's an assessment. Do you think it's going to rain? That's an assessment. Those are informal types of assessments. But sometimes we need formal assessments that can give us a starting point, a line, what is going on in that person's life now. And those kinds of things can vary. Some of you have had me in classes where I've done a couple of assessments on purpose. I usually do those in Human Services 101. This is one of the ones I do. This is the COPS. You like that backwards? This is a vocational test, an assessment, if you will. And it comes back with a nice graph and all kinds of information on what your interests are vocationally. So it gives us a place to start where we can talk about you have a lot of things in common with people who do certain jobs. And let's take a look at what those might be as you try to decide what you want to major in. Now, that's a starting point for me to talk to you and get you talking about you and what your interests are. So I always have them on my desk. Not that they're an end-all and not that they have absolute truth. It's a place to start talking sometimes. There are tests of mental measurement. And there's a mental measurements yearbook. In fact, it's a huge 2-volume set. It may be 3 volumes now. I only have the old one. Big set. It names every mental measurement thing there is. And the WAIS, which would be very common, or the WISC, which those are the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for children and the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale. Very common IQ tests, very formal. You can't give them. You have to be licensed to be able to give those. The Stanford Binet. Those kinds of tests are used in education and also by clinical psychologists all over to find out, what your skills are, what your IQ, if you will. It is not an absolute, but it gives you a place to start, something to work with, a kind of a bottom line. So as we take a look at it, you look at if you come to MJC as a student and you want to take an English or math class, what do? You get assessed. You're going to take a math assessment test. You're going to take an English assessment test. Those are assessments. You could go into the military, or you could, when you're in high school, the test that they use that determines what job you're going to have in the military is the ASVAB, which is the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. There are a myriad of kinds of tests, and you have to decide what the ones are that could give you the information that you need. To serve people who are homeless with mental health services, they are supposed to be mentally ill. How do you know that? Do you walk up to them and assess them by saying, you're acting really crazy, so therefore you're mentally ill? No. Usually there's some sort of battery of assessment exercises that you do to determine whether somebody is schizophrenic, whether somebody is whatever they are. You don't just decide that somebody is deaf by saying you're not listening to me, you're not hearing what I say. You do assessments to determine that. And those types of assessments are kind of interesting because they deal with sounds. Those are all assessments. So when I asked you to name a few, how do you know what they are? Well, most of you probably would want to give a reading assessment. Maybe not, but almost every one of you said you might want to know how they read. How do you do that? Well, you find out if they can read, and there are assessments for that. Some assessments you have to be licensed to do. You can't even buy the tests, see the tests, inspect the tests if you're not licensed as a therapist or whomever it is that it's determined has to administer them. But there are many tests that you can ask employers to buy and have for you that might give you some information about people. Even when you're going to have somebody who lives on their own, wouldn't you want to know if they can do some arithmetic? I'm not talking about algebra. Who needs algebra? Shh. Not my favorite. Most of you know I hate math. But anyway, but you do need to know, can they subtract? Can they add? Can they do their own checkbook? Are they capable? Can they go into a grocery store and buy groceries and know what they bought and how much it cost and whether they give a $5 or $10 bill or whatever to pay for it? How do you assess that? If you see this as a functional science in psychosocial rehabilitation, then you need to determine their functionality. And you don't just do it the first day you meet them. You find out a little informal assessing, and then maybe you might want to say, would you mind taking a little, handwritten test for me or whatever, because it'll tell both of us something about you that you may need to know. Maybe you need a GED. That too is a big assessment. So just be very, very careful. It's one of those fields that you cannot get away from assessments. They're here. There's a reason for them. You can Google and find out. So, I did that before I gave you the question. I thought, okay, am I giving you something that's really hard for you to do? No, it's called, what's a reading assessment? Look it up. It'll give you a whole bunch of things that some of them you won't be able to get hold of. They're too expensive or you can't administer them. But there's some quick and dirty little things that you might have, in your desk when you meet with somebody to decide functionality. So you didn't do well on that particular question, but you did well on everything else because it was really good. And I really appreciate it, and I appreciate your answers. If you have a question on this, call me. For the most part, I'll let you redo something if you didn't do well. But understand, you didn't read the question. It said name, and that meant name a couple of tests, and you didn't do that. Just saying, I'm going to assess them for mental health. What does that mean? What is a mental health test? Okay, a couple of you named some, and I do appreciate that too. But there are only about 3 of you out of the whole class that gave any names of any tests. So maybe it was a very, very poor question, or I should have given you this information ahead of time. But it's only 2 points. But everybody who answered the question, period, got a 1. Nobody got a 0. So go back and look. You need to know some of those assessments. And that assessment issue is a big part of the domains on psychosocial rehab. So anyway, you're going to see it on the test if you take it. Thanks.